CM, CM. My name is Wayne Sparrow. I'm the elected chief of the Musqueam First Nation. My traditional name is Yakalak. It gives me a privilege and honor to welcome each and every one of you here today, from our leadership, our elders, our past leaders that are not with us here today. I just want to acknowledge our leaders here that are standing with us. And I know there's a very important announcement coming on the housing, and we all struggle with the housing issues. And as a Musqueam people, we're here in support of both governments and the city, where we can strengthen those relationships and partnerships. So on behalf of my community, I want to take this opportunity to welcome our Premier, Prime Minister, our Mayor to the traditional territory of the Musqueam people. I'm going to stop now because it's starting to rain a little harder and I don't want to get too wet on. So, ArriveCan, thank you. And I could introduce my good friend, MP Joyce Murray. ArriveCan.
Good morning. I'm Joyce Murray, and I'm the Member of Parliament for Vancouver Quadra. And before I begin my remarks, I'll just want to acknowledge that we're on the unceded traditional lands of the Musqueam peoples, and to thank Musqueam Chief Sparrow for opening this in a good way. I'd like to welcome Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Eby, Mayor Sim, and the many other city officials and elected representatives and members of the media. A little over a week ago, Premier David Eby and his government unveiled a new initiative, BC Builds, which leverages government, community, and nonprofit-owned and underused land to create more rental housing for middle-income earners, as well as lowering construction costs and speeding up timelines. It's about all parties working together. Housing is top of mind for constituents in Vancouver Quadra, whether they're students attending UBC, young families looking for a home close to work and to childcare, or a senior wanting to remain in their community long-term. Creating more housing is vital to a city like Vancouver. So I'd now like to welcome Mayor Ken Sim to the podium and thank you all once again for your attendance today.
All right, how's everyone doing today? Woo! Feel like we're at a concert here. Good morning, everyone. Look, I'm pleased to be here today with the Prime Minister, Justin, the Premier, David, a lot of members of Parliament, Joyce Murray, Jonathan Wilkinson, Randeep Sarai, Wilson Mao, Ron McKinnon, and Ken Hardy, and of course, the Chief, good friend, Chief Wayne Sparrow. Now, I do also want to acknowledge that we're hosting today's press conference on the unceded territories of the Musqueam First Nation. And I want to thank you for your generosity and your hospitality and the love and care that you show this land that we get to live, work, and play on. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to unlearn what we've been taught in the past and learn the true history as to what's happened on these lands. And if we do that, we're going to build an incredibly bright future full of love and prosperity for all of us and going out 7 generations. I look forward to that journey. Okay, stating the obvious here, Vancouver, the reality is Vancouver, the region, the province, and the country is in a housing crisis, and all levels of government need to work together more than ever before if we are going to make a material impact on this challenge. And last week, the Premier and Minister Kahlon launched the BC Builds program, which shows that the province recognizes the importance of having people live in the communities that they work in. Now, for Vancouver, this was incredibly vital, as we are finding that more and more of our people, the people that work in the city of Vancouver, are living further and further away. And for Vancouver to succeed, our people, including but not limited to school teachers and tradespeople and teachers and first responders, need to be able to live in our city. And that's why our team at the City of Vancouver formed the Vancouver the Vancouver Housing Development Office explicitly to use city land to build more middle income housing. And today's announcement by the Prime Minister providing $2 billion, like $2 billion with a capital B, in additional financing will help deliver thousands of additional homes so middle-income families can live where they work. And this financing is in addition to the province investing an additional $950 million through the BC Builds program and another $2 billion in low-cost construction financing. Like, you guys are awesome. We love you guys. I'm just saying, like, this is literally, an example of putting your money where your mouth is. And so on our part, the City of Vancouver is ready and willing to work with all of our partners to build more housing faster. And so on our end, we are working to reduce permitting wait times and eliminating unnecessary red tape that has hampered home building to date. And this will allow us to put this money to work. And so in closing, I'd like to thank the Premier, David, your office, and Minister Kalon's office, and your entire team. You've been amazing partners, and not just on the housing file. You guys have been doing a lot of great things for the City of Vancouver, and we can't, I can't say thank you enough. And so I'd also like to thank the Prime Minister and his team. Justin, you have been incredibly generous. And look, thanks for not giving up on Vancouver and the province. And listen, if we have to stand, like, we'll stand in the rain. We'll stand in the snow if you give us another $3 billion, like I tell you. No, I'm just, like, actually, I'm not kidding about standing in the snow, but this is incredibly generous, and we can't, say how much we appreciate it. It's incredible. And so with that, I'd like to introduce our Premier, David Eby.
Thanks so much, Ken. It's really great to be here today with the Prime Minister on today's announcement, and it's as you can see, the grass is greener here in British Columbia. Prime Minister, you're always welcome here. A little rain doesn't scare us in the Lower Mainland, and the good news is about the rain on a cool day like today is hopefully it will be snowing up in the mountains for everybody that likes to get out and enjoy recreation in the beautiful mountains of British Columbia. I would like to thank Chief Sparrow for the welcome to the territory. And not just for the welcome to the territory. Chief Sparrow and the Musqueam people are leaders in housing in British Columbia. They are an example of how reconciliation isn't about giving stuff to First Nations at the expense of everyone else. Reconciliation is about First Nations, provincial government, federal government working together to lift all boats, so we all benefit when we do things differently. The housing that Musqueam is building right here out at UBC, but also the Jericho lands and in partnership with the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh people. And then a little further east, I can see the Sanok development that Squamish is doing coming up over the bridge, hundreds of units of rental housing. This is how we do things in British Columbia and in Canada. It's amazing. Thank you, Wayne, for your leadership on that file. And I know it's a bit process heavy, but I want to thank Joyce Murray. Joyce and I have worked together for many years, and she's a true community leader out here in Vancouver. She's represented her constituency so well for many, many years, led incredibly important files, including fisheries for the federal government. Joyce, it's a pleasure to work with you, and it's great to see you. Thank you for being a champion for housing in our city and in our province. And the rest of the speech will be about the Prime Minister. It's hard to imagine. It's only been a week since we formally announced the BC Builds program, where we're using publicly owned land, where we're partnering with First Nations, local governments, health authorities, school boards to take underused land and turn it into something that's desperately needed, which is housing that people can actually afford. The big problem we have in BC is people earn decent incomes, but they can't find a place that they can afford, that's close to work, that meets the needs that they have or that their family needs. We need to build that housing. And we know we can't do it alone. There are huge challenges around housing. The cost of construction materials has gone up. There are labor shortages as we build out our province in so many different directions to respond to the massive population growth we've seen. The Bank of Canada continues to hit us with high interest rates, driving inflation up by driving up the cost of housing. Rent and mortgage payments were the two leading categories of cost increase for British Columbians, driven by Bank of Canada policy. I continue to try drive home the message to the governor that we will not get inflation under control in British Columbia without addressing the fact that high interest rates are driving higher housing costs for people. And obviously record population growth. This province is growing quickly and we understand why. It's a wonderful place to live, it's an incredible place to live, and we welcome people. We need to build the housing for them to get there. So with all these challenges, we're not going to solve them any one level of government, the private sector, the not-for-profit sector on their own. We will not be able to solve it. It takes everybody working together, and that's what BC Builds is all about. And there are those politicians, I want to underline this, that say that the best way forward is to get government out of the way. I'm not even kidding. They say, sell off the public land. Sell off public land that could actually be used to build affordable housing. That's a suggestion that has been put forward by a candidate for federal office. Let speculators back into the market. Get rid of the speculation and vacancy tax. Allow people to leave places vacant while families search desperately for housing. Don't do any regulation around Airbnb or VRBO. Allow people to buy up strata units and use them as hotels at a time when people are desperate for housing. These are people who are running for office, who want to lead our province or our country, who are putting forward these suggestions that make absolutely no sense if we actually want to deal with the housing crisis. We have to bring people together. We have to use every resource we have, including public land, including government financing, including the nonprofit sector, including the for-profit sector, working together to deliver this housing. Nobody can do it on their own. And that's what we're doing. That's what BC Builds is all about. I was so proud to announce the $2 billion in construction financing for BC Builds to build actually attainable middle-income housing in our province using this land that's available. An additional $1 billion to drive down rents and costs even further. We're starting with rental housing. We're going to move into housing for purchase as well. This is a model that has been used in Singapore, in Vienna, in far-off places like Seoul, Korea, and in Whistler, British Columbia. We know that it works, and we're taking that model and we're expanding it dramatically. And I want to thank the Prime Minister personally for his leadership in recognizing that this model is transformational. This is how we change the direction of housing. What the Prime Minister has announced today, $2 billion in additional funding for the BC Builds program, will be transformational for thousands of families in British Columbia that are desperate for housing. They can afford housing. They just need it to be available. This money will make it available for them, and we'll continue to work through the system again and again to support more and more people going forward. We said that BC Builds was a program constructed to grow, and it is growing massively today. Prime Minister, thank you to you and the federal government for stepping up in this way. An important element of today's announcement is the third BC Builds site that we are announcing. Fourth? It's happening quickly. The fourth BC Builds site that we're announcing, a beautiful new co-op in Yaletown, 112 units, close to park and transit. Construction expected to start this summer. This is on land owned by the City of Vancouver. Thank you, Mayor Sim, for your amazing work at the city to partner with us to identify this land, to commit to the fast tracking on the permits to get this built. It is going to be an amazing thing for so many families. I know so many folks who have heard of someone or who knows someone who lives in a co-op. They're like, how did you get that? How did you get that actually affordable, stable place to live, that community for you and your family? We're building co-ops again together, thanks to the leadership of the federal government and the City of Vancouver as well. We know that this work is so important. This is what is holding back BC's economy from being even stronger. Making sure that there's housing for the people who help make our province go, who help build our provincial economy, who help make our country the amazing place that it is. This is fundamental to being successful in British Columbia and in Canada. And the Prime Minister and the Mayor and First Nation recognition of that, and all of us working together to deliver that is so exciting. And I want to thank them very much for that. Just briefly, before I wrap up, I want to thank my colleagues Lisa Bear and George Chow for stepping into new roles in Cabinet. Lisa Bear is taking on post-secondary and future skills role. And George Chow, Citizen Services, and Ravi Parmar will be our new Parliamentary Secretary of Credential Recognition. All of them are going to do amazing work. We've got huge and important issues to address in post-secondary and future skills as we train up British Columbians for the jobs of the future, including in building the housing that we need, and Citizen Services delivering the services that all British Columbians count on. I want to thank my colleagues for taking on these important roles. With that, I would like to recognize and welcome Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, and thank him one more time for his leadership in making today a great day for British Columbia and to give hope to so many families that are out there looking for a decent place to live. Prime Minister Trudeau.
Bonjour, good morning. Great to be back here in my second home in Vancouver. It is a real pleasure to be here with two great friends and two more that are all focused on building the kind of future that we need together. First of all, Wayne, thank you, Chief, for your continued leadership, your vision of true reconciliation, which is about partnership and prosperity and working together to build better, stronger communities for everyone. You're a great partner and a great leader, and we're glad to keep working with you. Joyce, whose riding we're in right now. Joyce, thank you for your friendship, for your continued dedication to not just this community, but this entire country. Your vision for a greener, more prosperous world has infused everything that we're doing. And it's always a pleasure to be back in the beautiful riding of Vancouver Quadra. Mayor Sim, thank you so much, Ken, for the Housing Accelerator announcement we made a few months ago. But your consistent, positive outlook, clear-eyed about the challenges we're facing, but always ready to roll up your sleeves and work constructively to deliver. This is the kind of partnerships across order of government that we need to see more of. And Ken, you've been an amazing partner and teammate in how we're responding to continue to grow Vancouver and create opportunities for everyone who lives here and who wants to live here as well one day. Finally, Premier Eby, David, thank you for stepping up with such a strong vision on the provincial side, understanding that what is good for BC ends up being good for the entire country. You are taking real action to address the challenges people are facing in their daily lives, but also the vision of how they see themselves into the future. Merci à vous tous d'être ici. Vous travaillez tous très fort pour rendre le logement abordable ici à Vancouver. Et le travail que vous faites est essentiel. It's great to be here also with other members of BC Caucus, Jonathan, Ken, Ron, Randeep, and Wilson. BC's always been a second home to me. And addressing this issue of housing really matters. I spent many years growing up, spending time with my grandparents across the way in West Van. I lived here as a teacher and understood how challenging it is, or was, even back in the late 90s. But what people are facing today is just beyond anything we could have imagined in decades past. And that's why we need to continue to step up in a coordinated way. BC actually was the canary in the coal mine for the problems we're seeing across the country around housing affordability. Home prices here started going up decades ago, and people around the country started to notice. But a lot of them, and governments in particular, ignored those warnings. Inaction by successive governments of all orders, investors buying up homes meant for middle-class families, and old-school zoning laws that didn't let communities grow in ways that kept up with Canada have brought us to a tough spot here in BC and right across the country. Les prix du logement sont trop chers pour les Canadiens, que ce soit dans les petites ou les grandes villes. Et c'est pas juste pour la classe moyenne et ceux qui travaillent fort pour en faire partie. Solving the housing crisis is a complex problem, and it won't be solved by simplistic slogans or buzzwords. Canadians need thoughtful solutions coming from every order of government, from builders, and from partners of every kind. And they need these solutions urgently. That's what our governments are focused on, and we're bringing partners together to get it done. And this brings me to the truly extraordinary leadership of this BC government, which is why we're here today. Last week, Premier Eby announced an ambitious and fundamentally practical new housing program that is going to turn underused public and nonprofit land into affordable rental housing for the middle class. They've started with over 20 different sites where they will take parking lots, underused land around healthcare facilities, potential buildings on top of daycares, and work with partners to build apartments that meet the needs of middle-class Canadians and their families. Part of that is working hand in hand with First Nations, but let's remember that these won't be your typical tiny one-bedroom units that have been popping up across downtowns across the country. These will be units of all sizes, including up to 3 or 4 bedrooms, the kind of places where families can grow and they can call home. And they'll be made available to families based on their income on a community-by-community basis, truly targeted for the middle class. This is a demonstration of how you build homes for people to live in, not just to pad investor portfolios. BC also recognized that this housing crisis is urgent, so as part of this program, they're going to speed up construction, cutting timelines by more than half. L'objectif de BC Builds, c'est de construire rapidement des logements locatifs pour la classe moyenne sur des terrains publics sous-utilisés. Well, our government thinks this is exactly the kind of visionary, progressive housing solution that people need. BC is providing $2 billion in low-cost loans so we can build more homes for the middle class faster. And the federal government is now doubling that funding, putting another $2 billion from the federal government's apartment construction loan program into BC Builds. This will support, at a minimum, 8,000 to 10,000 new homes over the next few years, with more to come as even more land is secured. They've already given a few great examples of how this program is helping create vibrant, livable communities. In North Van, municipal land is being developed by a nonprofit to build 180 homes for people who work in the city of North Van, like firefighters or tradespeople. And it's being built in a part of the community that already has daycare facilities, senior supports, and recreational spaces. Now in Duncan, Up Island, Cowichan Tribes is working with a First Nations-owned developer to build almost 200 homes for middle-income people living in the Cowichan Valley. And the development will also have space for Indigenous businesses and a new headquarters for Cowichan Tribes. In both of these cases, at least a fifth of the units are going to be made available below market rates. On a besoin de solutions comme ça. Le gouvernement fédéral est fier d'être encore une fois le partenaire de la Colombie-Britannique pour ce projet. Now, David, on a personal level, you were sounding the alarm on housing long before you became Premier. So it's not surprising that you're taking such concrete, visionary action with BC Builds. What you're doing here is transformative. And I am hoping that other provinces take careful note of the leadership that you've shown and the capacity to actually deliver, to keep people living in cities, keep people growing and optimistic about the future, to make sure young people can see themselves starting a family in the communities that they call home. These are the things we need right across the country. But as is the case with so many things start in BC, and your leadership personally and your friendship on working together to make sure this happens is something that I'm really, really excited about. Because as a goal, as a country, we need to make sure that housing is affordable so that a middle-class salary is enough for people to live in the communities they love and where they work, whether they're a teacher, a nurse, a small business employee, whatever career they have. On est là pour aider ceux qui sont prêts à agir. Toutes les communautés du Canada doivent construire plus de logements plus rapidement. We need to use every tool in our toolkit to meet this generational challenge. Canada is the best country in the world, so let's keep working hard together to make it even better. Merci beaucoup, mes amis.
Thank you, Prime Minister. We'll now go over questions from reporters, starting with CTV News. Oh, no? All right.
This question's for the Prime Minister. Just pull it up here. In an interview today with CTV News, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, he said that he expects the alliance members, including and specifically Canada, to spend 2% of GDP on defense. But if they're not at that level this year, they should have a date or when they will hit 2%. Your government has never articulated a date. Yes or no to when they will say when Canada will hit that 2%?
When we took office in 2015, we took over from a Conservative government that had underinvested in defense. Under Stephen Harper and his Conservatives, defense spending in Canada actually dipped below 1% for the first time. And that's unacceptable. That's why, from the very beginning, we committed to increasing defense spending by 70%. Over time, we're seeing the world continue to get more challenging, more complicated, with really difficult geopolitical forces, including a war in Ukraine. That means we need to continue to step up, and we have as a government, we will continue to. We will be there to step up with our NATO partners. We will be there to continue to make sure that the women and men of the Canadian Armed Forces have the equipment they need, and that our allies can count on for us to continue to be there for them.
Date in mind when you could reach that 2% number?
We're going to continue to put forward our budgets and our proposals at the appropriate times.
Next question, Bloomberg.
Hi, good morning. A question for Premier Eby, actually, which is, you made some remarks about Bank of Canada. Are you calling explicitly for the Bank of Canada to cut rates now? And if so, what would be an appropriate level and why?
Thanks. My concern with the current interest rates in British Columbia is that the biggest driver of cost for families here is when they go to renew their mortgage, and they used to pay, I don't know, the amount they used to pay is now doubling or in any event, dramatically increasing beyond what their budgets can afford. And as a result, when families are seeing their mortgage payments go up by that much, they're cutting back on all kinds of other expenditures. It's having a profound impact on British Columbia. People who don't have mortgages, who just have debt, are seeing their monthly payments go up every month. The people who are trying to rent, they're looking for a place to live. The developers who would build, the home builders who would build this rental housing, are seeing construction financing charges go through the roof, making it impossible for them to build the rental housing that's needed. So when I look at the numbers from the Bank of Canada, and they say that inflation for rents is up 6%, and inflation for mortgage payments is in the double digits, I know what's driving inflation in British Columbia, and it's interest rates. And so BC Builds, we can do our part, and I agree with the governor that interest rates alone will not solve the housing crisis. But we're doing, as you can see today, everything we can to build the housing we need. We're expediting processes around building housing near transit. We're providing government financing to deal with some of the impacts of interest rates. We're providing public land. We're allowing people on single-family lots to build duplexes or triplexes with the same amount of processes building a single-family home. It's just basic work that needs to be done. And every province, I agree, should be doing that work. However, we are doing that work in BC, and we're feeling the impacts of interest rates far more profoundly. The Bank of Canada is the best placed, the governor of the Bank of Canada is the best place to set the interest rates ahead of governments. They're independent, that's their role, but they really need to pay attention to what's happening in BC, how families are being hurt here, what is driving costs here, because I can tell you right now, it's housing.
And can I just ask a follow-up, and for the Prime Minister as well, have you not considered cutting fiscal spending as a way to address inflation as well?
Yeah, you know what, this is an argument actually, and I suspect we'll probably have this argument over the next few weeks in relation to BC's budget as well as in the next election. There are definitely people out there who say when people are hurting, when the economy is struggling for various reasons, the best thing the government should do is pull back and not support people. I just fundamentally disagree with that. That is the time when people need government to provide support. I was out in Langley the other day, and I was talking to a woman who supports vulnerable seniors and talking about the increased risk of homelessness for seniors in British Columbia. Is now the time to stop building long-term care housing, providing supports for seniors in relation to housing, so we can have a bunch of seniors sitting down in the homeless shelter? I was at a school where kids whose parents can't afford groceries for breakfast are getting a breakfast program. Is now the time to say, well, unfortunately, we can't afford the province-wide breakfast program that we established. Kids, you're going to have to go hungry today because, global financial things. The reality is that we will have this debate over the budget and over the course of the budget and over the course of the election about whether British Columbians want a government that steps up and supports people when they're vulnerable, when they're hurting, or a government that pulls back, and we'll have that discussion.
First of all, on inflation, we did get a piece of good news this morning. The inflation rate dropped down below 3%. which is within the target rate that the Bank of Canada sets in terms of target. So we are optimistic that the Bank of Canada will start bringing down interest rates sometime this year, hopefully sooner rather than later, but that is their decision to make. But the challenge that David just outlined is the challenge that we share as we're here today as progressive governments that understand that the best way to support people through tough times is investing intelligently in ways that are going to help them without adding to inflation. Investing in dental care, as we did for seniors and for kids who don't have access to it and families, that's not inflationary, despite the fact that right-wing politicians like Pierre Poilievre voted against that with some inflation excuses. Being there to support families in times of need, that's something we continue to believe in. Stepping up on childcare, where we signed the first agreement with BC, where creating $10 a day or cutting childcare fees in half and creating more spaces as we bring them down to $10 a day, that takes off huge pressure from families that are seeing mortgage prices, mortgage rates and costs go up. Continuing to step up in ways that are investing in housing, investing in middle-income rentals that people can afford, taking the GST off of purpose-built construction from rental apartments. These are things that, yes, the federal government and the BC government respectively have to spend money to invest to help people through these difficult times. Right-wing politicians continue to talk about the fact that we need cuts, that somehow cuts are going to help people get into homes or afford childcare, or cuts to programs are going to be able to help the more vulnerable or seniors. Their approach on austerity, their approach of justifying their cuts and going back to a trickle-down where the wealthiest get great advantages and tax breaks and hopefully it'll make it down to everyone else, simply doesn't work. It never has. And right now, today, you have proof what happens when progressive governments step up, roll up our sleeves, and provide solutions for people. Yes, we need to, and we have, continued to see inflation come down, and we need to continue to watch it come down, and that means being fiscally responsible. But doing so in a way that puts support for people and support for the economy that we're building for the future at the center of everything we do, that's the thing that right-wing conservatives simply don't get.
Thank you. We'll now go over to Canadian Press.
Thank you. A question for the Prime Minister from my colleagues in Ottawa, actually. So there are more than 200,000 Ukrainians in Canada who have been displaced by the war, and several surveys show many of them would like to stay here, but that it would be difficult to accommodate that many people into the current immigration plans. So with no end to the war in sight, what's your message to Ukrainians who would like to stay here in Canada on a permanent basis?
I got to sit down with the Ukrainian family just a couple of days ago in Winnipeg, and we talked exactly about that, about the displacement. They had, their middle son was really finding it tough here in Canada, but the older son made a great group of friends. These are people who've been displaced by the horrific invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin and the Kremlin, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to be there for them. Canada will be there for Ukraine with as much as it takes, with as long as it takes, despite conservatives, politicians pulling back their support for Ukraine free trade. We know that we need to be there, and we've accepted 200,000 people from Ukraine who are right now living, contributing in communities across this country. We're focused on ending this war. We will continue to be there to support them, and I think a lot of people are going to be making decisions once this war draws to a close. In the meantime, we're going to continue to be there to support people going through unbelievably difficult times because of Vladimir Putin's heinous actions. Okay. On est là pour les gens d'Ukraine, on l'a été pour accueillir des gens qui sont à travers le pays et on va continuer de les appuyer. On comprend tous qu'on veut que cette guerre finisse le plus rapidement possible, mais entre-temps, on va continuer d'être là pour soutenir l'Ukraine et les Ukrainiens contre l'invasion illégale et barbare de Vladimir Poutine.
Yeah, just pivoting. So, how did the government go so wrong with the ArriveCan app contracting and development, and do you take responsibility for those failures?
There continue to be ongoing investigations, both external and otherwise, into the contracting process. It is obvious that the contracting process rules were not followed in this case, and we need to make sure that there is accountability and transparency around that. But let us remember that during the pandemic, we were reaching out to try and keep people safe, keep people alive, make sure that our economy didn't falter at a time where everything was in question. Even in those most difficult times, we need to make sure the rules were followed. When public servants, in this case, did not follow the rules adequately, there are investigations and there will be consequences.
Radio-Canada maintenant.
Bonjour, la question est également pour vous. Alors, une question sur les demandeurs d'asile. Québec vous réclame désormais plus d'1 milliard de dollars pour l'accueil des demandeurs d'asile et vous accuse aussi de rester passif par rapport à ces autres demandes. D'abord, allez-vous rembourser l'ensemble des sommes demandées et pourquoi n'avez-vous toujours pas agi sur les autres demandes, comme de répartir les demandeurs d'asile dans l'ensemble du pays ou encore de réviser votre politique d'octroi de visa?
Ça fait des années qu'on travaille main dans la main avec le gouvernement du Québec. On reconnaît à quel point les Québécois, les communautés au Québec ont été là pour accueillir des demandeurs d'asile de façon généreuse et extraordinaire. Et donc, le gouvernement fédéral a été là avec des centaines de millions de dollars et on va continuer de travailler main dans la main avec Québec pour s'assurer qu'on puisse continuer d'avancer de la bonne façon. L'important, évidemment, c'est de rassurer tout le monde d'un bout à l'autre de ce pays qu'on a un système d'immigration fonctionnel, rigoureux, où les règles sont suivies. C'est pour ça, d'ailleurs, qu'on a pris des gestes concrets au niveau des étudiants internationaux, au niveau, on est en train de regarder aussi avec différents pays sur les questions des demandeurs d'asile. On s'assure de réconforter et de renforcer pour les Canadiens le fait que notre système d'immigration est essentiel pour un avenir fort au Québec et ailleurs, mais doit continuer d'être fait de façon appropriée.
Merci. La prochaine sera en français et en anglais, s'il vous plaît. Il y a beaucoup de flou maintenant entourant les dépenses du gouvernement fédéral sur l'application ArriveCan et les contrats octroyés à l'entreprise GC Strategies. Alors, qu'est-ce que vous pensez de la possibilité d'entendre en comité les dirigeants de l'entreprise?
Il y a des enquêtes qui sont en train de se faire depuis des mois sur cet enjeu-là. C'est évidemment quelque chose de très préoccupant et on s'attend à ce qu'on ait des réponses et de la transparence de la part de ceux qui ont octroyé ces contrats et ceux qui ont reçu l'argent.
En anglais, s'il vous plaît, celle-ci.
J'ai déjà répondu en anglais.
Next question.
Yvette Brand, CBC News in Vancouver.
President
President Zelensky said that on Monday, Avdiivka fell in part because of a lack of ammunition. What is Canada prepared to do to step up ammunition production?
We have, over the past number of years, delivered $2.4 billion in military, committed $2.4 billion in military aid to Ukraine, delivering things like artillery shells, vehicles, non-lethal weapons, non-lethal equipment, along with weapons, and we're going to continue to be there to do more. It is a shame to see the Conservative Party turning its back on Ukraine by standing against the economic opportunities of the renewed Canada-Ukraine free trade deal. But this government will continue to be there to stand with Ukraine and deliver more of the necessary equipment to continue their fight against Russia, which they're doing to protect their own territory, but they're also doing to protect the values and principles of democracy that underpin all of our free societies.
And today's announcement obviously is meant to help people with housing, but how does it help people desperate for housing today? How does it fix things in the short term?
We know that there have been quick supports for housing, whether it was with the Rapid Housing Initiative, whether it was with a range of other things we've done to create emergency and rapid housing. This is about building now and for the future as well. People know you can't build an apartment building in 10 days, but you can do it in a faster way than has been done in the past. And that's why the leadership that BC has shown in compressing timelines, in making sure that people can see the buildings go up around them, see the opportunity for them to be able to get into a new home, to start a family, to grow their nest eggs. These are things that we're continuing to focus on, and it happens with constructive collaboration, cooperation across orders of government, not by picking fights among us as Conservatives want to. Yeah, of course.
Thanks. The question of how to get housing for people who need it today is a really important one. And that's why our government has really stepped up on any initiative we can to find housing that's available. So around Airbnb and VRBO, those regulations kick in very soon. We have, in some cases, almost the entire strata building has been taken over by short-term rentals. This is housing that needs to be available for people to rent long-term or to buy. Is one example. Strata units that used to have restrictions saying you're not allowed to rent out your unit. We said, and it wasn't universally popular, but we said we can't have that restriction in a place where people are desperately looking for a place to live. Right now, British Columbians across the province are filling out their speculation and vacancy tax forms. This is a tax that you only pay if you own a second home and you're not renting it out. It's very straightforward. You want to avoid the tax? We want people to avoid this tax. Rent out your place because someone's looking for that place to rent. All of these initiatives together have brought on tens of thousands of units that were previously being used as investments or hotel rooms that are now actually places for people to live. But again, that's just part of the solution. Today's announcement with the Prime Minister, another piece of the puzzle, and I'm really happy to share that even since we announced BC Builds a week ago, we've had dozens of First Nations, local governments, and other landowners coming forward saying, how can we participate in this program? And the funding we're seeing today from the federal government will help us take advantage of those opportunities as well to build even more homes in a 12 to 18 month period instead of a 3-year period. It's all part of how we're working on this important problem together.
Last question from the Globe and Mail.
Hi, for the Prime Minister. So the Globe has been reporting about the high amount of money being paid to private nursing agencies by provinces across the country, an amount that's escalating. So I'm asked, as your government signs health care funding agreements with provincial and territorial governments, are you concerned about this escalating level of spending on private nursing agencies, and is there anything your government can and will do to address that?
Well, first of all, integral to the healthcare agreements that we've signed, we announced $200 billion in investments over the next 10 years. Part of that is by signing new health deals with various provinces. BC was the very first one to step on that, and on the Aging with Dignity investments as well. These are things that are necessarily part of the Canada Health Act and abide by the Canada Health Act. We have, as a government, clawed back and pulled back money from provinces when they have not been following the Canada Health Act. We need to make sure we're continuing to defend a public, universally accessible healthcare system. It's core for progressives like David and myself. It's core for so many Canadians. Unfortunately, we've seen Conservative premiers play more and more dangerous games with two-tier or privatized healthcare. The issue that we have with that is that they are trying to undermine our confidence in our public healthcare system so Canadians are more open to privatized. That is not the way to allow things to go. So what we did in our healthcare agreements is lock in transparency, data sharing, and rigorous data collection that is going to ensure that citizens of the provinces across the country looking at their healthcare systems can see the results that their taxpayer dollars are paying for, are investing in, to be able to draw better services out of a public healthcare system. We will always stand up for the principles of the Canada Health Act and will rely on provinces like British Columbia that are leading the way on public health to be able to do that.
So does that mean that you would be prepared to withhold health money from a province if you felt that the spending on private agencies was too high?
These are processes we will continue to look at. There's always different models of delivery across the country. We need to make sure that those models of delivery all respect the Canada Health Act.
Thank you, everyone, for standing in the rain with us. This is what concludes the press conference for today. Thank you.
Merci tout le monde. Thank you so much.